Jones, Christine Bellino, Benjamin Fridkiss with you. Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan joining us in studio. Just a couple of days after $1.92 billion spending proposal was laid at the table of 19 Jacksonville City Council members, this is where kind of the rubber meets the road, if you will, over the next several months. It always ends up being a very busy summertime for the Jacksonville City Council Finance Committee and then ultimately the City Council. But as you said, Mayor, in your statement to City Council, we have to lean in that this is going to be from potential to progress. So as we were talking a moment ago, a budget is a statement of priorities. How did you prioritize spending and what your vision was and what you promised on the campaign trail leading up to last year and being elected? And how did that all come to bear in this overall $1.92 billion spending plan?
Well, look, a budget is a moral document. You know, it says what our values are as a city. And so we believed very heavily that we needed to invest in public safety. Went very heavily toward what we felt were far more fair contracts for police and fire. It's a big city. There's a lot of responsibility. We grew by 17,000 people last year. And so really our ad valorem taxes pretty much go to pay for public safety because we have such a large city. And so we were pleased to be able to do that. So police and fire, big investments this year. Big investments into our underserved neighborhoods. I think there were $150 million worth of CIP projects that go into 8 districts, 8, 9, and 10.
For those who don't know?
Capital improvement plan. So infrastructure on critical needs in 8, 9, and 10, districts 8, 9, and 10. But we are very intentional about making sure that we are going to keep marching toward keeping those broken promises of consolidation, because that's how we have a city that works for everybody. And that was obviously a major goal when I came into office.
So as we look at the law enforcement part, and you actually mentioned taxes, we might as well just get it right out of the way. Are taxes going up as a result of this?
They are not.
And why not, despite the increased spending? To the average person who's hearing this, how come taxes don't go up despite an increase in $165 million?
Well, look, I don't want people to get the idea that we're bringing in less money than the ad valorem taxes increased this year. The money that we got increased, but this is such a nuanced thing. It was about $68 million less than what we were anticipating, and the reason for that was because we had a lot of folks that had their properties reevaluated. Commercial properties primarily that had a lot of vacancies after COVID. So we have a lot of buildings that are at least half empty. Insurance costs have gone way up for commercial properties, and so they asked to have those properties reevaluated, revalued. And so that takes a little while from COVID to now. Those things started to roll through the tax system, and so they were reevaluated and they came in far lower. So that's what the reframing of what we thought we were going to have. So what we did is we decided to have identify several one-time costs that we could take out of the city reserves, and we did that because last year we had such a big year we had extra because of all the money that was coming in from the federal government. By the end of the year, we took $78 million and moved it into reserves, and we're just talking general reserves. And then I personally took $20 million from that and moved it into emergency reserves. So we have targets for both of those things. We are almost double still, even with the money that we're taking out of reserves this year, we still have almost double the amount of money in reserves that is our target. So we have plenty of money in our reserves. We don't want to use that as something that we would use for recurring expenses, but for one-time expenses it makes sense. So there's not a need to raise taxes. We just need to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible with the dollars that we have. And so what we're doing this year is we have created a number of what we call lean teams. That we are evaluating the processes of the city. Our goal is to create a far more efficient city government. We're asking all the city departments to evaluate the way they do things. As you know, we've already streamlined a few things. Permitting, we've got a new procurement system. We want to make sure we are as efficient as we can be, and by next year we hope we'll be able to show that we have been able to save the city a whole lot of money.
There was some initial pushback from Finance Committee Chair, former Council President Ron Salem, and a couple of others who were initially a little bit concerned about tapping that emergency.
We didn't tap any emergency funds. No emergency funds were tapped.
So just the
general. There's two pots of money. Okay. There is the general reserves and there are emergency reserves. we did not even come close to touching emergency reserves. And in the general reserves, even with this money that we want to take out to pay for these one-time expenses, we still have almost double the amount of money in those reserves that we target. So there is money there to be used for this purpose. So it's not something we'd want to do every year, but I will tell you that 9 out of the last 10 years, we have taken money out of reserves. The only year we didn't do that was last year. Okay. So it is a very common practice, and something that we hope that after we've been able to implement these lean processes this year, we will not have to look at doing.
And is the assessment of the commercial properties process done so that we're like back at a foundational level, if you will, for those commercial properties?
You know, that's a great question. I don't know how many more are out there to be reevaluated, but I do know that what we were told is that there was a fairly large tranche of them that went through this year. So that my hope is that's where we are. That's my hope is that we're not dealing with that again. But as I said, we have to look at everything with fresh eyes, and that means we have to look at all the processes. We've done that since we came in, and we're just continuing that process. So we're trying to streamline everything. There are places where we need to create more. Like we talked about with permitting, we needed more people in permitting. There may be other city departments where we can reduce the amount of manpower that we have there. So right now, we're taking a look at all that to try to make sure we have the most streamlined process we can have.
All right, I'm glad we clarified that point because it does raise some questions about the spending and the increase in how we get to that point. But we were starting about law enforcement. So more officers and
Yes.
more vehicles.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about what investment is happening there on top of the new contracts that have just been approved.
That's right. We've approved pretty significant raises for both police and fire. I have to tell you, when I came in, I don't guess last year I had a whole lot of time to look at all that stuff, and plus it wasn't time to negotiate yet. And when they put the salaries in front of me for what we were paying, our police and fire folks, I said, gosh, that's lower than I would have expected, and we need to do better. And so we initially came in with the idea that we wanted to make sure that we paid them a wage that would allow them to make sure they could recruit and retain. And then we were able to also negotiate a return to a defined pension benefit for those folks, because they were very, very intent on saying to me that if they did not have that, they were going to lose officers to other departments, and we just can't have that.
So that's done, and on top of that, more officers who are coming in this
Yep.
budget cycle?
When we came in last year, we wanted to add 200 officers over the next 4 years. So what the sheriff has done is he's asked, basically last 2 years, he's asked for an additional 40 officers. They weren't able to really fill those entirely before, and we think that with these new salaries and this new FRS option for police, which won't go into effect until 27, that just the FRS part, the salaries will, but not the FRS. We think they'll be able to retain a lot more of the talent that they'd like to keep here.
How soon will the sheriff and you be able to judge that this change is having the needed impact, or the desired impact of being a good recruit? Are we already seeing signs of it as he's out recruiting law enforcement to say, hey, coming in 27, we've got this?
Well, but it's not just that. It's the fact that we've really increased salaries quite a bit. So he believes it's going to have an immediate impact. We'll see. We'll see how long it takes us to recruit and get all those officers in place, because sometimes it's a process that takes quite a bit of time. But he is very hopeful that it's going to be something that will be an immediate impact.
It's 9:08 now, coming up on 9:09. Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan joining us in studio. Rich Jones, Christine Bellino, Benjamin Fridkiss here as well. For those who aren't natives of Jacksonville or have lived here long enough, the Jacksonville Journey, you may remember, was a pretty significant venture under former Mayor John Payton, which was really focused around trying to swarm the issue of crime from a number of different angles.
Yes.
And if you were with us on the mayoral campaign trail last year with you and ultimately Daniel Davis talking about the need to reinvigorate or bring back some of those crime prevention sort of tools. Is a rebooted Journey in this budget?
Yes.
And if not, how does it go forward over the next year and year plus?
Yeah, it is. We filed legislation on that, and it is in this year's budget. But it is we are creating that with existing funds. So we were able to find existing funds that through other processes that we can invest in that to get that started. And that's a partnership with the sheriff. It's a partnership with other agencies that work on crime prevention. I think a lot of it is just making sure that every one of the stakeholders that really has can bring to bear some solutions here are engaged in the process. And so I'm excited about getting that started. It took a little while. You know, as you remember, Lakeisha Burton was with us at first and ended up having to step down because her husband Greg had some health challenges. We brought in Charles Griggs, and he picked up where Lakeisha left off, and so we're just now getting that legislation going.
Approximately how much is it going to be? Back in the day under the Payton administration, it was $30 million. These days, $30 million isn't going to be $30 million.
Well, but for the process of this year, we're looking at $4 million. We're not. It is going to be a process to ramp up, but there's no sense in allocating more money than we can spend at this particular time in terms of getting everything set up. We're going to set up a board. There needs to be accountability measures built in. You know, so it's all a process. This year it's going to be $4 million.
And so for those again who might not be familiar, the journey included a number of different things from education
Right.
and other sorts of programs and projects. What's the vision there for this year, and what's your ultimate goal for that by the end of your first term?
Well, look, I think we started that process, whether you want to call it journey or not, we started that process with our literacy initiative, which has been wildly successful, as you know. We're about to cross 1.5 million minutes read. We started off with a goal of 300,000 minutes, increased it to 1 million, and now we're at 1.5 million, about to pass that. So I don't even know what to do to incentivize people. I mean, it's fantastic. So, but as we know, 70% of the folks in our jails do not read at that third grade level that we need folks to have that reading proficiency at. So we know that to be able to have better literacy will create less folks that are having difficulties with our criminal justice system. So that's one part. But some of the things that we've talked about is just more presence, in the neighborhoods. That's one of the things that made the journey so you invested a lot more in police back then. There was a big investment in community policing. In partnership with a lot of the groups that are doing work in the communities, and the sheriff is already doing some of that. But this will be a really focused effort. So I think it's going to be a great partnership.
Not a budget question, but you mentioned the sheriff when we were talking about it a little bit off the air. How has your relationship evolved with him? I mean, he wasn't a proponent of yours on the campaign trail, but you both said we're going to work together. How has that relationship developed?
Listen, I have a great relationship with the sheriff. I appreciate all the things that he's trying to do in terms of transparency. I think when you talk to folks on the streets, I think it's the number one thing that they want to see from their government. They want to see more transparency, and I think he's taken a lot of steps toward that. He's spending a lot of time in the community. We have a good relationship. I think we both are very focused on making sure that it's great to see those homicide numbers coming down. We want to keep that happening, but we want to make sure that everybody feels safe in this community. And our next thing that we're going to be looking at is, how do we collaborate on this new homelessness initiative? Because there's a new law going into effect in October that means that it's going to be illegal for folks to sleep on the streets. So we're going to try to create, or we aren't going to try, we have created, we're going to roll it out in a couple of weeks, a plan to try to make sure that that's not a big law enforcement issue.
So while not giving away the entirety of the plan, and Christine's going to weigh in just a second too, but since we're on the topic, it would involve about $10 million, as I understand it, from the city, and then some other money from external sources.
Yeah,
what will it look like? Big picture, I guess.
Well, it's a $15 million initiative. $10 million is coming in from the city this year. And this is absolutely necessary because we have to comply with that law or we could face a lawsuit. So what we did last year is I spent a lot of time talking with some folks that created a project called the Karma Project in Reno, Nevada. And it's basically, the idea behind it is you take people who have been in homelessness and make sure that they have the opportunity to work with the folks who are trying to make sure that they can speak to people who are living on the streets. Because a lot of times there's distrust there. And to help those people understand, okay, now we're going to create services for you. So it's about creating housing, because we weren't excited about doing a tent city. I want people to be able to live with some dignity. So we are working toward various forms of housing. Wraparound services, mental health services, other services that will help get people into the workforce once they've been able to establish themselves, that they don't have other issues to work on, and then eventually to get them back out into society, those that we can. And the goal is to get to what we call functional zero. And that is, obviously you're always going to have homeless people, but you want to make sure that you're getting as many people, back off the streets as you can, and more than that are going back on the streets.
Mayor, two questions. One, the money that's taken from the general fund, if you could just explain to those who don't know how that money is replenished year after year. And then two, what are the pain points for you for this year's budget? What were you not able to accomplish that you were going to target for next year?
Well, first of all, in terms of the general fund, there's a target of having 10% of GSD, General Services District money, into that fund. At the last number I got of that, we were at 26%. So we have a very healthy general fund, general reserve. That money can be added to or it can be subtracted from, but the goal is never go below 10%. So we're very healthy there. As far as the emergency reserves, that target is 7%, and we are also over that. So we're in good shape in terms of our reserves. Sorry, what was the other question?
The pain points for you for the budget, things that you know, we've talked about all the things that you're able to accomplish. What are some of the things that you weren't able to accomplish that you are going to target personally for next year?
Yeah, I was disappointed that we had to reduce the number of public service grant money, and also our money for arts and culture was reduced more than I would have liked. We really wanted to grow that budget because arts and culture has a 20-to-1, return on investment. And so what I've told people this year is I've tried to very much focus on those things that have the greatest amount of return on investment for our citizens. Because the idea is, let's grow our revenues from every source that we can without raising taxes. And so that was disappointing to have to do that. I'm trying to think what were some of the other things that let's see.
Is that because I saw in the budget that the money for grants was significantly lower than what was anticipated? Is that why that was cut?
It was cut because we had to cut $13 million out of the budget. And so we had to cut various projects or reduce various projects like those because we even reduced a little bit from the mowing budget, which I really hated to do because people have been so excited to see that, more. We didn't cut a lot from mowing because we still think it's very important.